much needed lunch break. Now we're gonna get back to it. They're the blueberry oatmeal muffins. I have to confess that I'm redoing the biscuits. This is how we made it to the final stretch, but we're here. We're going to be making a few dinner meals today, and I think I'm going to start with the beef stew first because that's what takes the longest. So I am going to chop up some chuck roast. Today we have a very busy day in the kitchen. I will be making 5 different freezer-friendly postpartum meals for my best friend and her husband. They just welcomed their first and, may I say, most adorable baby boy I've ever seen. And I just wanted to make sure that their freezer is filled with meals so they wouldn't have to worry about cooking for a week. I wanted to focus on meals that were cozy, comforting, meals that they would like and would also be very easy for them to reheat. So everything today is going to be cooked all the way, just so they don't have to worry about cooking anything themselves. We're starting off with a hearty beef stew, and I know that this is one meal that I've made for them before. They've absolutely loved it, and it's actually one of my husband's and I's favorite meals to have here at home. So let me show you how I make it. I start off with cubing some chuck roast into decent sized cubes, and I season them generously with coarse kosher salt and black pepper. I do take the time to remove some of those extra fatty parts from the chuck roast just because I don't like that cooking into my broth. However, if you have a fat strainer and want to take the time to remove some of that excess fat later on, then you can absolutely do that. But I like to save myself this step and it won't go to waste. You can actually render out this fat and use it for other recipes, like to sear some chicken. My favorite part about eating this dish is that you can absolutely taste all that flavor from the beef that starts when we sear it off. So I find that it's important to season generously at the beginning because that extra flavor is what develops into your broth. So don't be scared to go heavy-handed here. Now I feel like this beef stew won't be complete without a creamy mashed potatoes. So on the side, I had already boiled a few potatoes and now I'm just mashing them until they're smooth, and I pour in a mixture of heavy cream, salt, pepper, and fresh herbs. I love the infusion of flavor that fresh thyme and rosemary gives to the heavy cream, and you can definitely taste all those flavors when you pour it into your mashed potatoes. When in doubt, just add a little bit more salt. All right, these mashed potatoes are good to go. I'm gonna set them to the side. We'll store them a little bit later. Let's see how our beef is doing. You want to make sure that you develop a nice golden crust on all sides of the beef just to lock in that flavor. And I do make sure to lay out all of my seasonings whenever I'm cooking a dish, just because I do tend to forget some of the seasonings when I'm going back and forth between searing and chopping. So I've laid everything out. So I have organic oregano, smoked paprika, chili powder, bay leaves, black pepper, garlic powder, tomato paste, and Worcestershire sauce. Whenever you season beef, you'll see that there's a beautiful fond left at the bottom of your pot. This is all flavor that's going to be absorbed by your mirepoix. If you don't know what a mirepoix is, that's just the French term for diced onions, celery, and carrots. And we're going to saute this until everything is sweat down, and you'll see that everything starts to soften. I love to add a few tablespoons of unsalted butter just to help release some of that fond from the bottom of the pot. Now this is where I like to add my seasonings just because it develops more of a flavor. We'll give everything a mix, add some of that Worcestershire sauce, and cook everything for about 1 to 2 minutes until you see everything beautifully combined just like this. Tomato paste is added next, and we do need to cook that down just for a few minutes because it does tend to be bitter if you don't take the time to cook it down. Now I add flour to act as a thickener for our stew. The flour does cook down as you continue to cook this beef stew. So we'll just mix the flour in until it's well incorporated, and then we'll use any type of stock that you have on hand, whether that's beef stock, chicken stock, or vegetable stock. Or if you don't have any, use water, but I highly recommend using some type of stock for just that added flavor. Then I add in the beef chunks that we seared earlier, and you'll see some of those juices have released onto the tray. Make sure not to throw that out and put it back into your pot because that's just added flavor right there. Now to finish this off before we move it to the oven to continue cooking, I like to add a few aromatics like bay leaf, thyme, and rosemary. Alright, so I picked up the kitchen a little bit and the beef stew is in the oven. I have the temperature at around 375 degrees Fahrenheit, and I'm going to check it every hour or so for about 2 to 3 hours. I want the meat to be tender and the broth to be very flavorful. I'm also going to add some carrots in there, but not until the meat tenderizes a little bit. So next thing is we're going to make some breakfast sandwiches. I have my griddle heating up here, and I'm going to start off with cooking the eggs first, and then after that we're going to cook some bacon. I decided on the eggs first because I know the bacon is going to render out a lot of fat, and I don't want my eggs to be super greasy. I also don't want extra work for me when it comes to cleaning up. So let's get that started. While those eggs are cooking up behind me, I'm going to work on a marinade for our chicken. We're going to make a cilantro lime marinade for our chicken thighs. And I just have freshly washed cilantro. And I'm gonna go in with the juice of 2 limes. These are some large limes and they're very juicy. Make sure to roll them out a little bit on your counter before you slice through them and juice them. And it would be even better if you have a lemon juicer, but I don't have one. I should get one by now, but I haven't. That's okay. Yeah, look how juicy these are. So we have a nice bunch of cilantro. I chopped off the stems. Again, this is 2 limes that we juiced. And of course, we're gonna need a little bit of oil. This is avocado oil. And for seasoning, we're going to do some oregano. Love oregano in this marinade. About a tablespoon worth. And then some chili powder for a little smoky kick. About half a tablespoon to a tablespoon. And then some smoked paprika. That's about a teaspoon and a half. Some garlic powder, measure with your heart. That's about a tablespoon, maybe a little more. And then of course we need some black pepper. I hear the eggs behind me. It sounds like they need to be flipped. That's about 2 teaspoons worth of black pepper. And then we're also gonna go in with some Worcestershire sauce. I don't think you can have too much of this, honestly. That was about 2 tablespoons. And then some cumin. You don't wanna add too much cumin now. I think that was about a teaspoon worth. All right, to this, I also have some diced onion here, and I think that's gonna give it a good flavor. Onion and cilantro and lime, everything, all those 3 are just delicious together. So that's about half a cup. I'm also gonna go in with a little bit of honey just to give it some sweetness. Now I have these garlic pucks. I freshly mince my garlic myself, and I turn them into little pucks and I put them inside a Ziploc and into my freezer. They work beautifully because you could just take one out and use it whenever you need to. So this is about a tablespoon worth of minced garlic, maybe about 4 to 5 cloves. And now we're just gonna blend this up, maybe add a little bit of water, and that's it. About this much water. We're gonna blend this up. While the mixture is blending and sitting for a little bit, I attend back to my eggs. The first batch is already done, so I'm just cracking some more eggs on here, adding a little bit of salt and letting those cook while we go back to our chicken. That's so good. It does need a little bit of salt. Something we forgot to add, but that's okay. I'm also gonna add a little bit of salt to our chicken, but let's find where to marinate it first. These were originally bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs. I took the time to remove some of the bone because I knew that it would be easier for me to cook this way. But if you prefer the bone-in, then keep it. You can also use a different cut of chicken, like chicken leg quarters. Those are delicious in my opinion because they're fatty, they're juicy, and they're also very affordable. Now we're gonna clean up our station a little bit. Make sure to sanitize your counters because we are dealing with raw chicken. And to our marinade, I'm just going to seal this and refrigerate for a few hours and we'll get back to it. Now our eggs are all done and I moved on to cooking the bacon for our breakfast sandwiches. And while that's cooking, we'll get started on our next dinner meal, which is chicken pot pie filling and biscuits. This dish is a comfort classic. It's rich, savory, and creamy. And you could choose to use pre-shredded chicken or even a rotisserie chicken if you'd like. But I'm using these large chicken breasts and I'm slicing them in half before I cube them and salt them generously on each side and give them a nice sear. Without overcrowding my pan, I'm making sure to sear the chicken on all sides, and just like the meat, we want a nice golden crust. I love that both of these dishes that we've been cooking so far have utilized the same ingredients. So just like how we did with the beef, we're going to sweat off some onions, carrots, and celery just until they turn soft. I'm adding in 4 tablespoons of unsalted butter just to help release some of that foam from the bottom of the pan and caramelize our vegetables. To season this, I'm using Green Goddess seasoning from Trader Joe's, onion powder, garlic powder, salt, pepper, and poultry seasoning. Mix that well and continue to cook for about 2 to 3 minutes. And we'll add in all-purpose flour just to help as a thickener for this chicken and biscuits. Gently pour and stir in chicken broth or chicken stock and continue to mix until no clumps remain. We'll also pour in half a cup of whole milk and half a cup of heavy whipping cream. Continue simmering this for about 20 minutes, add back in the chicken, and add a few fresh herbs like fresh thyme and rosemary just for added flavor. This next dish is perfect for a weekly meal prep, one that the kids would love and you can serve over rice as tacos, burritos, or even loaded nachos. They reheat very nicely and only take a few simple ingredients to put together. You're going to start with thin strips of chicken breast, season with salt, pepper, paprika, cumin, chili powder, garlic powder, and a drizzle of avocado oil or any neutral oil works. Mix well until your chicken is thoroughly seasoned, and in a prep bowl, combine sliced yellow onion, sliced mixed peppers, salt, chili powder, oregano, a few dashes of Worcestershire sauce, minced garlic, and a good drizzle of avocado oil. Toss your onions and peppers until they're fully coated and then add in your chicken. This light marinade smells so good, and you can use this in shrimp or salmon if you prefer. Now, you can leave your chicken to marinate in the fridge for up to 3 days if you don't plan to cook this right away, but otherwise, I'd suggest to at least allow it to marinate for 2 to 3 hours. Our beef stew smells so delightful. It's starting to get very tender, and it's the perfect time to add in chopped carrots. I'll check back on this in the next 30 minutes. Okay, I cleaned up the kitchen a little bit. I had a much needed lunch break. Now we're gonna get back to it. It's currently 4:13 p.m., but so far we've completed the filling for the chicken and biscuits. We're gonna check on the beef stew right now. We have to assemble our breakfast sandwiches, and we need to get started on either making the biscuits or making our next meal, which are burritos. So let's see what we do first, but let's check on the meat. When I'm gifting these meal preps away, I don't want whoever's receiving them to worry about returning any of my dishes to me. So to make it easy and affordable, I store each meal in an aluminum foil or Ziploc. I do give the pans a quick little rinse just to ensure they're fully clean before I pour in the meals I took a lot of time to make. Since my chicken pot pie filling and beef stew are done first, I can start to store them in these pans and tidy up the kitchen so I can begin to cook the ground chicken for my cheesy chicken burritos. This ground chicken cooks so quickly and it tastes delicious. I had leftovers served with white rice and a side of avocado, and wow, was it an amazing lunch. So to cook this, you're gonna wanna heat a pan over medium heat with a drizzle of avocado oil. I brought out my pot because I was cooking a larger batch, and you can do that too if you prefer. Now, I season this with salt, pepper, complete seasoning, also known as sazon completo, smoked paprika, and chili powder. You'll want to crumble the chicken as it cooks and combines with the seasonings, and once the chicken is 90% cooked, we'll add 1 to 2 spoonfuls of tomato paste. Cook that down for 2 to 3 minutes to remove some of the bitterness from the paste, and pour in a can of Rotel tomatoes. This recipe is extremely easy, and it could easily become one of your favorite weeknight meals to have on rotation. We're just about done, but I finished cooking this with minced garlic, oregano, a few dashes of Worcestershire sauce, and a tablespoon of sugar to help cut down on the acidity. I moved the ground chicken over so it could start cooling. In the meantime, I'm going to heat up this griddle and we're going to cook up our cilantro lime chicken. It's been marinating in the fridge for a few hours and it should be perfectly marinated by now. Now we can finally start assembling our breakfast sandwiches because our chicken will need some time to fully cook through. I love these breakfast sandwiches because they involve very little ingredients, are super easy to put together, and they taste amazing. We're going to start with slicing our English muffins in half. No need to toast them. You can also use bagels or croissants if you prefer. It's really up to you. We'll do a light coating of mayo to each half, and then we'll add in our egg, 1 slice of bacon broken in half, followed by half a slice of your preferred cheese. I'm using Monster on mine. And then I finish off with another slice of bacon before topping it off. I'll continue to assemble my sandwiches until I ran out of my toppings or muffins, and I was able to get 11 breakfast sandwiches out of these. These reheat so nicely, and it's become one of my favorite breakfast meal prep items so far because they're delicious and exactly what I need when I'm on the go and I don't have time to cook myself eggs, oatmeal, or even a smoothie sometimes. Time truly does fly by, and I am multitasking pretty heavy at this point. My seared chicken is resting on the side, and now I'm starting to cook the chicken fajitas we prepped earlier. I'm searing the chicken fajitas in my pan with very little oil on a medium heat, and while that's cooking, I'll start shredding my cheeses for the ground chicken and cheesy burritos. I'm using my food processor to help speed up the shredding process, and to my processor, I'm shredding a combination of Colby Jack, Monterey Jack, and mozzarella cheese. This is my favorite cheese trio, and not to mention, it's also a fantastic ingredient prep item that you can store in your fridge and use it for breakfast, in quesadillas, grilled cheese, tacos, or anything that your heart desires. Now these burritos are very simple. We'll start with layering a large burrito-sized flour tortilla on our working surface, add a generous layer of our shredded cheese, a big scoop of our cooked and cooled ground chicken, followed by another layer of a more conservative amount of cheese. Carefully roll and tuck in the sides of the tortilla, making sure to not overfill because it can break the tortilla. These burritos are for sure a cheesy and hearty delight. They're high in protein, and I'm sure they would work wonderfully with low-carb tortillas if you prefer a low-carb and high-protein option. If you want to preserve these as best as possible, you can either flash freeze them and store them in a freezer-safe bag or container, or you can wrap them individually in plastic wrap and tightly seal them in a freezer bag. So I'm going to finish wrapping up these burritos, and in here we have our breakfast sandwiches. We also have our chicken pot pie filling and our beef stew. This is our marinated cilantro lime chicken that was seared on the griddle. And we have our chicken fajitas that are cooking, and I will package them up once they're done, and I'll let them cool first. All right, I will see you guys tomorrow morning, and I will show you everything in its entirety. Good morning, or should I say good afternoon. I've had a much needed rest. Went to the gym this morning, had a little bit of me time, but now I'm ready to get back to it. What we have on the menu for today, we're gonna finish up the biscuits for our chicken pot pie filling, and we're also gonna make some blueberry muffins. It will make a great addition to the breakfast meal prep, as well as like maybe a little sweet treat on the side. And I'm super excited, so let's get that started. All right, so we're gonna start with the blueberry muffins first, and I do have the recipe right in front of me. I'm going to be using a recipe from Sally's Baking. The website is Sally's Baking Addiction, and they're the blueberry oatmeal muffins. I'll have that link down in the description. But so far, I have a few ingredients that I've already pre-prepped. So she calls for 1 cup or 85 grams of old-fashioned whole rolled oats. And these are gonna be soaked in whole milk. 1 cup or 240 milliliters of whole milk. So that's already been sitting there for more than 20 minutes. We have a room temperature egg, and we also have 8 tablespoons of melted unsalted butter. So I'm just gonna go through the directions here. It says combine milk and oats, set aside for 20 minutes. That has already been soaking, and it says it's crucial to the recipe. Oh, and you also shouldn't leave it soaking overnight because it's too much time for the oats to be soaking. So it says if you find the oats haven't soaked up to any moisture after 20 minutes, give it a stir and wait 10 more minutes. Ours looks just fine. Preheat oven to 425 degrees Fahrenheit and spray a 12 count muffin pan. So let's preheat the oven. All right, for the next direction, it says to whisk the flour, baking powder, baking soda, cinnamon, and salt together in a large bowl. So using my scale, I'm going to weigh out 156 grams of all-purpose flour, or that's equivalent to 1¼ cup. Perfect. 155. We're gonna need a teaspoon of baking powder and half a teaspoon of baking soda. Half a teaspoon of baking soda. And 1 teaspoon of baking powder. We're also gonna need some salt and some cinnamon. We'll need half a teaspoon of ground cinnamon. I don't think it would hurt if we add a little bit more, so half a teaspoon and a little pinch extra of cinnamon. And then I'm using kosher salt, and the recipe calls for half a teaspoon of salt. So we're gonna do just that, but I'm using coarse kosher salt. All right, so all the dry ingredients are in the bowl, and we're just gonna give this a quick little whisk. And now we'll start with the wet ingredients. So here I have 8 tablespoons of unsalted melted butter. To this, we're going to combine half a cup or 170 grams of honey. All right, I ran out of honey there, but I have a brand new one here. And we're just gonna use this one to complete what we're missing. So this recipe looks like uses honey as a substitution for white sugar. Oops, I went a little bit over. So I went 5 grams over, but I believe that's fine. Nothing's gonna happen. All right, so we got our butter, we have our honey, and I don't think we need our scale for anything else. To this, we're just going to crack our room temperature egg. And I had that egg sitting in room temperature water just so it can come to room temperature. The water itself was a little bit hotter than room temperature, so it was warm water. All right, I'm also gonna pour in the vanilla extract. So we'll need 1 teaspoon of this. And then we'll give this a whisk. All right, so while the muffins are going, we can start on our buttermilk biscuits. I'm using a recipe that I've used time and time again. The first time I used it was a couple months ago, and fun fact, I've only made biscuits about 3 times. So the first time was definitely a learning lesson. My biscuits did not turn out as tall and flaky as I wanted them, and I've learned that it just takes a lot of laminating when you're making the biscuits in order to get that flaky biscuit that everyone loves. So we're gonna start off with the dry ingredients, and I'm using the recipe from my computer. I'll share the recipe down below. This is from TikTok, and we're gonna need 3.5 cups all-purpose flour. This is half a cup here. So that's 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5, 3, 3.5. All right, we're also gonna need 3 teaspoons of sugar or 1 tablespoon. It's the same thing. So 1 tablespoon. And then 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder. So we got half, 1, 1.5, 2, 2.5. 2.5 teaspoons of baking powder, 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. I don't have a 1/4 teaspoon, so I'm just gonna use half of my half teaspoon. Okay, so that's 1/4 teaspoon of baking soda. Then we're also gonna need 2 teaspoons of salt. Again, I'm using coarse kosher salt. That's half, 1, 1.5, 2 teaspoons of salt, and that's everything for our dry ingredients. Now I'm gonna pick this up and be right back. Now it's really important that when you make biscuits, you use very cold butter and very cold buttermilk. Why? Because that's what keeps your biscuits intact and it creates those very flaky layers. So I have 2 sticks of unsalted butter. These are completely frozen, and I took out my cheese grater because I prefer to grate my butter instead of cubing them up. I just realized that's how I like to do it. And then I have my cold buttermilk here. Now to my dry ingredients, I'm just going to mix this up a little bit just so the baking powder, baking soda, salt, and flour is all well mixed together. And then we'll get started with grating our butter. Now you'll find that the butter is a little bit hard to work with just because it is completely frozen, and that's okay. It does take a little bit of arm power to grate this, but it could be done. So using the larger side of your cheese grater, you're going to slowly grate your butter horizontally, because I found it's easier to do it that way than if you were to flip this over and try to do it like this. That works too, but you know, I prefer this way. You do want to be careful with your hands, making sure you don't get cut, as well as your nails. If you have nails, keep them away. This is where I use a little bit of arm power to grate the remaining. I'm going slowly but carefully. And then eventually, once you have very little of your butter, you can keep trying to grate it, but honestly, you can try breaking it apart with your fingers, or you can use a knife to cut it into little squares. I just find that it's a little too tedious and could be dangerous if you try to continue grating this butter. So this is how our butter looks like. It's very nice and cold. They're little clusters, and you just pour them into your dry batter. You will try to move as quickly as you can when you're working with biscuits, because everything has to stay in the cold temperature. If you work your butter too much, naturally your body temperature is going to start to melt this butter, and you don't want it to melt completely. All right, so at this point, I'm going to combine the butter with the flour using my hands. And those big chunks of butter that we had that we couldn't grate anymore, I'm using my fingers to just break them apart. And you'll see that your flour now resembles wet sand, which is what you're going to aim for. Now we're gonna do 1 cup of buttermilk. And if you need more buttermilk, you can always add more buttermilk. Now let me grab some flour. I'm checking on the muffins right now, and I think they look absolutely gorgeous. Let me show you. Okay, I just checked on the muffins and they smell and look so delicious. All right, so to our biscuits, I'm just combining that buttermilk with the flour and the butter until everything comes a little bit together. And if you see that it's a little bit dry, you can always add a little bit more buttermilk, but try to keep your dough as dry as possible. I'm gonna move this over here. For biscuits, you want to try to combine the flour together as much as possible. And I'm using a dough scraper to combine. Okay, this needs more buttermilk. I have to confess that I'm redoing the biscuits because I overdid my batter and I wasn't happy with it. I did not throw it away. I put it in the oven and I'm just gonna see how they turn out. If they're good, then I'll keep those for myself. I'll keep those in the freezer, but I'm redoing the biscuits again the correct way so I can gift them to my best friend. So let's do it all over again. So I am properly going to measure 1 cup. That is where I went wrong the first time. And we're gonna slowly incorporate this. The first batch I did kind of looked like Play-Doh, and I was not happy with it. I was super frustrated, but I was determined and I did not want to throw it out. Where I didn't read in the recipe is that you can use up to 1 1/4 cup, whereas I only used a cup. And that's where I went wrong. That's starting to look better. It's starting to become sticky. I'm gonna work with this dough, and the remaining dry dough that I have here, I'm going to pour a little bit more buttermilk and mix that well. Add it to what we already have. Oop. See, that was too much. Or maybe not. Okay. Alrighty, let's do this again. See, that's feeling better. My hands are sticky, which is good. We're just going to firmly press this dough together. And I love how I can see the little pieces of butter sticking out. For this second batch, I didn't have my cheese grater clean and I didn't want to wash it again. So I ended up just cutting the pieces of butter very, very small and then using my hands to combine that into the flour. am much more happier with how these turned out. You can see that they hold their shape. They're about 1 inch tall. You can see the butter specks on there, and I just know they're gonna turn out gorgeous. This is how the first batch came out. You can see that they're not perfect. I believe that they automatically look dense, and they look a little bit like rustic at the same time. I'm gonna try them out to see if they taste good, and if they do, I'll keep them and I'll eat them throughout the week. But definitely this batch I know is gonna turn out beautiful. Let's put that in the oven and I'll show you how they look at in the end. We're all cleaned up and this is how the biscuits turned out. They look absolutely gorgeous. Let me show you how they compare to the original batch. And I'll tell you why I was discouraged with the original batch. As you can see, they look pretty dense. They've already turned hard. And these are the second batch. You can see how the second batch is much more fluffier. You can see those layers popping out, and the size, I mean, the comparison, you can see the difference. My husband already tried one of these. He loved them. It has good taste, and since they're dense, I feel like you can taste everything much more, but I prefer a flakier biscuit, a softer biscuit, and these will go so perfect with the chicken pot pie. Delicious. I can't believe we made it to the final stretch, but we're here. I'm so incredibly happy with everything that I made. This meal prep really opened my eyes, and it showed me that I can do this for me and my family, but I know that my best friend is definitely going to enjoy all of these delicious home-cooked meals. And if you have someone in your life that just had a baby or is going through a rough time, I hope that these meals served as inspiration for you. But let's just go through everything that we've made together. So we have our braised beef already packaged. We have our mashed potatoes that are gonna go with the braised beef. Now these are already foiled and packaged, so I can't show you what's on the inside, but I have some clips that I'm gonna put up here on the screen. We have our chicken fajitas, and this would go perfectly with some rice, some tortillas, or what I did was I purchased these tortilla chips. I know they're gonna love the tortilla chips with the fajitas, and they can add some salsa and some sour cream. If they have cheese at home, they can also add that too. They can have their own fajita night. It'll be delicious. Then we have our our cilantro lime grilled chicken. Again, this could make a perfect rice bowl. They can add beans if they have the canned beans at home, or they can just add salsa and sour cream. It'll go perfectly. They have enough for those two meals to combine it together, so I'm sure they'll love it and it'll be just fine. And then the last one is the chicken pot pie filling. Now, traditionally, you add peas to it. I know that my best friend's husband does not like peas, and that's why it doesn't have any peas in it. But it has the carrots, it has the chicken, it's creamy, it's comforting, and to pair with that, we have these beautiful biscuits that I'm sure that they can enjoy for breakfast as well. And speaking of breakfast, we did add some blueberry muffins. That's what we made today for them. And we have some breakfast sandwiches that are on an English muffin with an egg, monster cheese, and bacon. So they're definitely gonna love that. And if they are feeling lazy and don't wanna heat up these meals, they have very simple ground chicken and cheese burritos. I saved a few of these for myself. They'll work perfectly fine throughout the week when I don't have time to make myself a lunch, or if I don't have dinner from the night before that I save for lunch, this will be perfect. So I saved 3 for myself and 6 I'm gonna go to them. Overall, I am extremely satisfied with this meal prep. I'm going to start putting all this stuff away and take it to my best friend, but I want to thank you guys for joining me in this entire meal prep video. If you like everything that you saw, make sure to give this video a like, subscribe to the channel, it'll help out tremendously, and I will see you in the next one. Bye friends.